Hello and welcome to today's lesson on the cardiovascular system. The purpose of the cardiovascular system is to move blood around the body as a carrier for oxygen and nutrients. And in mammals, there is a double circulatory system, which means that the blood pumps through the heart twice for each complete circuit. Here is a diagram of the double circulatory system. The blood comes into the right side of the heart and gets pumped into the lungs where it becomes oxygenated, and then it returns to the heart where it enters the left side and then is pumped throughout the body. When we talk about hearts, we always have it in the anatomical position. So as we're looking at the heart, the right side is on the left and the left side is on the right. The heart is a strong muscle that pumps blood throughout the body. The human heart has 4 chambers, the left and right ventricle and the left and right atrium. If you watched the Schoolhouse Rock song, you can remember by left and right ventricle, left and right atrium, come do it, circulate. Anyway, so that's what I grew up on and how I remembered the chambers of the heart. As I said in the last slide, the left side, or the right side, rather, as we're looking at it, it's on the left, but it's the right side, handles the oxygenated blood, deoxygenated blood. The left ventricle is the strongest part of the heart because it has to squeeze all of the blood opposite of gravity and into the rest of the heart, whereas the right ventricle only has to squeeze it as far as the lungs, so the left ventricle is the strongest part of the heart. And as we follow these arrows, it comes into the right atrium and then down into the right ventricle out to the lungs where it is oxygenated. It comes back from the lungs through the pulmonary vein down or into the left atrium and then down into the left ventricle where it finally leaves the heart to be spread throughout the body. The heart is so thick that it actually needs a supply of blood on the outside of the heart, or else it would not get enough nutrients. Even though the muscle of the heart is filled with blood, it's so thick that it wouldn't diffuse through the muscle to supply enough energy to keep beating. So that's why there are coronary arteries, and those are the arteries on the outside. So if you've ever heard of coronary heart disease, this is the area that is diseased that they're talking about. There's a great video of the heartbeat simulated in an animation that I've attached to the canvas. It very clearly shows how the blood flows through the heart in through the different chambers and explains some good information, and it's only 48 seconds long, so take a look at that too. If I tried to play it in here, it wouldn't work, otherwise I would. The chambers of the heart are separated by valves, and the valves in the heart prevent blood from flowing in the wrong direction. There are valves in between each atrium and ventricle, and between each ventricle and blood vessel. There can be complications with these valves. One of my grandfathers had a mitral valve prolapse, which meant that that valve was not preventing blood from flowing the wrong direction, and therefore his left ventricle had to work too hard. And so what happened is the muscle got overworked and his heart grew to a size that was too large, and it was a fatal condition. So these valves are very important for keeping our blood flowing and keeping our heart functioning properly. As the heart is pumping, there are two different steps, and this is called diastole and systole. So as the heart is filling with blood, this is diastole, and then as it contracts, it is systole. So when we think about the blood pressure, that when we go to a doctor and they say something like 120/80, the 120 is the pressure that occurs as the heart is contracting, and the lower pressure, the diastolic pressure, is the pressure as the heart is filling. Blood flow is not continuous, but matches our heartbeat. So as our heart beats, the blood is surging through our veins in a pulse. And this causes a change in pressure in the arteries and makes the arteries bulge with the heartbeat. And so that's how you can measure your heartbeat with your pulse. And this occurs either in the wrist. If I put my fingers on the inside of my wrist here, it doesn't quite work if you use your thumb, or on the artery right here in the neck. As people exercise, they use more oxygen and their heart rate increases. That's because blood carries oxygen, so in order to get enough blood flow to all the different cells that need oxygen for aerobic respiration, which we'll get into later, the heartbeat actually has to increase in order to accommodate that new need of oxygen. Blood vessels are the way that blood is carried throughout the body. They vary in size and function. As we see in the diagram, there are blue and red. Blue corresponds to deoxygenated, red is oxygenated, but this diagram is a little bit misleading. Blood is never actually blue for humans. So our blood is red all the time. That's sometimes a misconception. So these blood vessels that have different functions have different names. The arteries carry blood away from the heart after it has been oxygenated. So in the diagram, that's the red veins. Capillaries are very small blood vessels that connect arteries to veins. This is more where the oxygen is released and nutrients are released. There are capillaries spanning throughout your body to get to most cells. There are not very many cells far away from a capillary because that's how they get their nutrients, is through these blood vessels. Then after the blood has become deoxygenated, it is carried back to the lungs and the heart through veins. Because of their different functions, they have different thicknesses. So the arteries have a very thick lining because as the blood comes away from the heart, the pressure is higher. So in order to accommodate this pressure and be able to keep everything in without bulging too much, the arteries have a very thick layer of muscles and elastic fibers. Capillaries have a very thin lining, so nutrients and oxygen can diffuse easily. There are some capillaries that have a wall made of a single layer of cells, so that's really thin. And something that your book wants to note is that it is not that the vessel is one layer thick, just the wall of the vessel, because otherwise it wouldn't make up the whole tube. Then veins have a thinner lining because the pressure is lower. It's farther away from the heart. It's after the veins or the arteries have branched into capillaries and then regrouped into veins, so the pressure is much lower and they don't need that strong muscle and elastic fibers to keep the blood inside. Due to the decreased pressure in veins, veins also need valves, just as the heart did, to prevent blood from flowing in the wrong direction. So in this diagram, we see that these valves allow for blood to go one direction, but if it tries to go the other direction, it will be stopped by the valve. Skeletal muscles also squeeze blood vessels and keep blood flowing. So if you've ever said, "Oh, I'm going to go for a walk to get my blood moving," that's actually what's happening. As your leg muscles are squeezing, they are actually pushing the blood back up to the heart. And so that is one important reason why they've always told folks of a certain age or smokers or pregnant women that if they are sitting on an airplane for a long time, they need to go walk around. And this is to keep the blood flowing and prevent a clot from forming. There are a variety of diseases that can occur in the heart, and they are categorized with the broad term heart disease. And there are a variety of risks that can contribute to heart disease. The top contributors are smoking cigarettes, if you have a diet high in sodium or animal fat. Obesity can also contribute to heart disease, as well as stress and genes. That's all you need to know about the structure of the cardiovascular system. The next lesson will be discussing blood, its components, and its functions. Answer the questions associated to this lesson and submit it by April 24th. If you have any questions, email me or attend a Zoom meeting. Bye.